Governor Pritzker gets some unwanted downtime, but he signed a lot of bills. We'll talk about it next on Capitol View. Welcome to Capitol View, the program where we talk about state issues, sometimes federal issues, and how they just might affect your life. I'm Bernie Schoenburg from the State Journal-Register, here today with Charlie Wheeler. I would say director of the Public Affairs Reporting Program at the University of Illinois Springfield, because that's true until this weekend, after 26 years. Charlie, congratulations on that, and welcome back to the show.
Thank you. It's always good to be here.
That's right. And Peter Hancock is back. He is a State House reporter with Capital News, Illinois. Peter, welcome to you.
Thank you. Good to be here.
So I opened the show by saying the governor got some unwanted downtime, and it just broke in the hours before we taped this show, but he has a hairline fracture in his left femur, in his left leg. Doesn't know how he got it. He's supposed to be resting and recovering for 4 to 6 weeks, but will be actively involved with his agency heads and updates with his staff. He doesn't, again, he's done his knee hurt for a while, and he did a lot of walking at state fairs, both in Springfield and DuQuoin. He's also been traveling around the state quite a bit, so sounds like limited movement, but he's doing fine. He's healthy other than this situation with the leg that just happened. And Peter, from one of your colleagues wrote a story that kind of put it all together, that he had signed in the time he had to do so 591 bills into law and vetoed, I guess fully vetoed 7, if that's right, and then 1 mandatory veto with changes asked of the legislature. So did quite a bit this year.
It was probably one of the more productive sessions that Illinois has seen in recent years. The legislature passed 599 bills. Some of them were duplicative bills, maybe slightly different, 2 versions of the same idea. So he would pick one and veto the other. That accounted for, I think, 3 or 4 of the vetoes. And then, there was a couple that he just thought needed more work. One having to do with the state's authority to apply for Medicaid waivers, dealing with the Affordable Care Act. One dealing with, would have required mandatory 1-year expulsions from schools if kids brought a BB gun or a paintball gun into the building. He just thought that needed some more work.
And the sponsor of that, Chapin Rose, state senator from over near Champaign. Muhammad, yeah. He even said that he was okay working with the governor on the changes from what I read.
So, yeah, you have a Democratic governor and Democratic supermajorities in both chambers, so 99.9% of what came out was stuff the governor was perfectly okay with.
Yeah, Charlie, you've been watching the process for a while. Your thoughts about Governor Pritzker's freshman year?
I think he did very well, and I think, was it Greg Hines referred to it as a marvelous, or hang on, because I wrote down the quote because I was impressed by it.
And Greg works for Crane Chicago Business, longtime reporter and columnist.
Yes, he said it was, if I find my cheat sheet here, I can't find the cheat sheet. Anyway, yeah, he said it was the most momentous in decades. And from my perspective, I think it was maybe the most historic in 50 years. The reason I say that is because of all the major issues that were addressed. We had a roughly $40 billion general funds budget as part of, I believe it's $145 billion overall budget, including everything. We passed a $45 billion public works program, first one in 10 years. We expanded gambling significantly after false starts, Lord, for probably another decade. We legalized recreational marijuana. We increased the minimum wage. He got a ton of stuff finished. Now, Ogilvy was more significant in that Ogilvy totally changed the way the state's finances work.
By establishing the income tax.
Well, and more so than that, up until that point, from 1818 until Dick Ogilvy comes along in 1969, we had budgeted on a 2-year basis. So in the odd-numbered year, they'd budget all the way to the next odd-numbered year. Ogilvy said, no, in modern times, we should do it every year. And he shifted the budget-making initiative from the General Assembly to the governor's office. He created the Bureau of the Budget. Now it's called the Governor's Office of Management and Budget. And of course, he did get a state income tax enacted. So in terms of all that was done, Pritzker's first session is probably the most significant in terms of major changes, things getting put in place. And we haven't even talked about the fact that we're going to ask voters in November of next year if we should change our income tax structure.
Right, to a progressive income tax instead of what's in the Constitution now as a flat tax.
With
And that was a
tax.
key part of what Pritzker wanted. So Governor Ogilvy, having such a big session, only served one term because people were mad at him for the income tax and perhaps for other reasons.
Yeah, they were mad at him for the income tax, and I always thought there were a couple other things that hurt as well, particularly outside the Chicago area. His EPA, and he established the EPA in Illinois, banned leaf burning all over the state. Now, as anyone who's grown up in Illinois and spent falls either enjoying the aroma of burning leaves or hacking and coughing as their asthma kicks in, that was a big deal. They also, for some...
That was later rescinded, of course, because people can still burn leaves unless it's outlawed
Yeah.
by your own city,
And-
like
and then-
Springfield did about 25 years ago now.
and then later, getting closer to the election, for whatever reason, the state police raided some VFW and American Legion halls downstate because they had illegal gambling,
So they were mad at
which
the governor.
was very common.
Well, like-
Now we've licensed these video poker machines. They were, everywhere before. Now we get a cut of it and doesn't all go to the...
So I guess the question is, though, you mentioned how much Governor Pritzker got done this year, but not everybody likes what he did. Not everybody
no.
likes more gambling, and marijuana is going to be legalized for adult use, and the minimum wage is continuing to cause an outcry by certain small businesses and even small governments who have to, by 2025 pay $15 an hour. So will there be significant backlash, Peter? Do you think that he will... we don't know yet. It's only the first year of his 4-year term still.
And there's still a veto session coming up. And
Right.
I believe the Illinois Chamber of Commerce wants to revisit the minimum wage law. Along with that, there are certain tax incentives, tax credits that small employers get that kind of cushions them against the higher minimum wage. And I think they want to come back and do a more regional approach to that so that businesses
words,
in areas where the minimum wage
So like it'd be different in
wages
Chicago than it would be in Carbondale.
Right.
give more of a break to people in
Right. Now,
lower
Governor
wage.
Pritzker really didn't want to do that before, so it would take
Yeah.
a lot of people bending. He does listen well, but it would take a lot of people bending his ear to
Well, this
get
wouldn't
that
be
change.
changing the minimum wage. It would
Yeah.
just be changing the structure of the tax credits that go to the employers to cushion them.
Oh,
against
okay,
it.
okay, gotcha. So in other words, the employees would be hurt. That
and
makes
if you
some
think
sense.
about it, Pritzker's a Democrat. Democrats historically are not considered to be the best friends that the business community has compared to Republicans. And yet I would argue that in a couple days at the end of the session, the business community got more than they did in 4 years under Bruce Rauner.
And this was through some last-minute negotiations with Jim Durkin, the leader
Yeah.
of House Republicans, who went to the governor and said, "Hey, we need some of this stuff."
Yeah, we did away with
including
the
tax
corporate
credits for-
franchise tax, which
Right.
had been around for more than 100 years. We extended some tax credits. We created a new tax credit for digital
For the data centers.
data centers.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so we did all these things that businesses wanted for a long time. They couldn't get them with Rauner as governor. They got them with Pritzker.
Yeah.
And the fact that everything was so copacetic, I think, has as much to do with J.B. Pritzker's personality as it does the party identification. Because Rod Blagojevich was a Democrat, and in his first 6 months, he wound up vetoing 113 bills,
from a Democratic
despite
legislature.
having Democratic control of the House and the Senate. Now, Jim Egger vetoed 223, and these are numbers that were aggregated and posted on Rich Miller's website, Capitol Facts. Egger voted 223, but he had a Democratic Senate and a Democratic House, and of course he's a Republican, so you'd figure there'd be some difference. But it's just amazing, as you said, the 99.9%.
Yep.
Yeah, so.
Very, very interesting.
And they're really big, important bills.
Right. Yeah, and it's not like the Republicans all are falling over themselves loving the governor, because as we saw on Republican Day at the State Fair, they still have differences. They want to make gains next year. They're particularly going to be fighting against the progressive income tax, saying that Pritzker calls that the fair tax because people who have more money will pay more. But Republicans say we have a flat fair tax now. Everybody pays the same percentage, and that's the way it's in our Constitution, and that's an incentive for businesses and job creators to come to Illinois and stay in Illinois, and we should keep it that way because it's one advantage Illinois has in their view. So that will be a significant issue that we're going to hear a lot about as time goes on. One of the bills that the governor did sign will outlaws, I guess, smoking in cars with children. And it's not a primary offense, like seatbelts wasn't originally a primary offense. You can't get stopped for it. Seatbelts now you can because they ultimately did
updated that. Yeah.
But there is $100 for the first offense, $250 for a second offense if you're stopped for something else and you're found to be smoking, even with the windows open with children in the car. So that's just, you can call it nanny state, or you can call it being fair to children's lungs. And it does seem to be part of a kind of a trend that even the Springfield City Council is recently looking at outlawing vaping in public places or in buildings. But this is just another move toward public health, and clearly the governor was for this one.
Yeah, I was kind of surprised. I wrote initially just a very short story about that, and the amount of feedback we got from editors. Well, what about this situation? What about that situation?
Right. Of course, you write for papers all over the state in your Capital News, Illinois.
People just seem shocked by it. One of the interesting things in it is, if you think back, one of the other laws that passed early on was the Tobacco 21 law, raising the minimum age
to purchase
tobacco to 21. When they did that, they also removed the penalties that used to exist for a minor who's caught smoking. The idea was, let's put the penalties on the people selling the cigarettes, let's not punish the kids. So in this law about smoking in cars with kids, if it's a 16 or 17-year-old driving by him or herself smoking, that's okay. If it's a 16 or 17-year-old who's a passenger or in a car with other minors, say a teenager who's going to pick up his younger siblings from the school or from a babysitter, then he can get punished. Walking on a sidewalk smoking a cigarette, blowing the smoke in the face of a police officer, you can't get punished. But if you're in a car with other minors, you can. People had a real hard time getting their head around that.
Charlie, you've always told your students to read the bill, and when you were a reporter for 25 other years for the Chicago Sun-Times, you always said you got to read the bill before you write it.
You have to know the fight.
Peter, it sounds like you read the bill.
But this is another example of how, I guess you could say, society has evolved, or on the other hand, devolved, depending on how you look at it. But I can remember when the debate on the House floor about whether or not we should require seatbelts, and the arguments were that this is a terrible infringement on my liberties. And somebody would raise the question, when we instituted car seats for kids is when this one came up that I was thinking of. The argument was, if you have to have your kid in the car seat, how can you nurse the child while you're driving? And I'm thinking to myself, whoa, who would do that?
You don't.
No, things have changed.
And the argument about smoking, it was always, it's a personal choice. And then the Surgeon General comes out and says secondhand smoke is really bad. And now suddenly it's not, if I want to give myself lung cancer, that's okay, but I shouldn't, through my exhalations, give it to Peter, give it to Bernie.
Yep, things do move on. There was another bill the governor signed up in the Chicago area, I think, it was sponsored by Chris Welch, state representative from Hillside, Senator Christopher Belt of Cahokia. They're both Democrats, and it is to keep a record for corporate boards, for corporations based in Illinois, to keep reports on the diversity on their boards. Just saying we need more people of color in top positions, or at least we should know, people should know if their companies they're dealing with, they're purchasing from, are diverse or not.
And women also, right?
And women,
yeah,
I think, Peter, I think
racial,
you know about this.
ethnic,
And of course, this was a watered down version. This is reporting who's on the board instead of mandating that certain groups be on the board, which was part of the discussion during the last legislative session.
And this follows on the footsteps of a bill that California adopted, or a new law that California adopted, I believe last year, requiring at least one woman on a board of directors. And I guess there had been reports about the boards in Silicon Valley, which are notoriously not diverse. all white men. And Chris Welch said he had heard about this, and so his initial bill would have required one woman, one African American, and one Latino on each board. Created a huge stir within the legislature, people thinking that was kind of overreach, telling private corporations who had to be on their board. And so it got watered down to where, well, we're just going to require public reporting of it. And the idea is that, well, the University of Illinois is supposed to take these annual reports, aggregate them, come up with a scoring system, and post on a public website how the corporations are doing. And the idea is that public shaming, I guess, if you don't have a diverse board, that corporations will on their own create a more diverse board just to look good on the list. And there is evidence that says, when you have diversity on your board, your company performs better. And there should be representation from all the different communities that you're trying to sell your products or services to.
Yeah, this reminds me of Carol Moseley Braun, former U.S. Senator, back when she was in the legislature, passed a bill to have police record the race of people that were in traffic stops just to get some records out there to say, is your police department,
racial
profiling kind of stuff, and that it proved, I guess, that it was a reasonable thing to take a look at.
DWB, driving while black.
So on we go. There was another bill that he has signed, was sponsored by Andy Menard, state senator from Macoupin County, south of Springfield. It's to help small pharmacies through rules concerning pharmacy benefit managers that have been having some trouble, I think.
Yeah, this is a really kind of obscure part of America's healthcare system, are pharmacy benefit managers. They're companies that act as middlemen on behalf of health plans, negotiating prices for drugs with manufacturers and wholesalers. And one of the things that will happen is they can negotiate very low prices as long as the person who's insured buys their drugs from Walgreens or Costco or CVS or one of the big retailers, and it really puts small independent pharmacies at a disadvantage because they don't have the same sort of purchasing power. They have an association that helps them buy in group discounts, but it's not nearly as strong as the big players in the drug market. Right. So for the first time ever, Illinois is going to put pharmacy benefit managers under the regulation of the Illinois Insurance Department. And we'll see how that goes. The idea is that it should work to the advantage of small independent pharmacies.
Which often serve smaller communities, rural communities, that kind of thing.
So I think the jury's still out on how effective this is going to be, but I think a lot of people are watching it, and a lot of other states are going down this road solely because Congress is so unable to act on the skyrocketing costs of prescription drugs that states are taking it into their own hands.
Yeah, I think one of the allegations, wasn't it, was that these PBM, the prescription benefit managers, would negotiate a really, really low price with the drug manufacturer. Then they turn around and mark it up considerably when they sold it to the health plan and pocket the difference. Yeah. I think there's going to be record keeping for that, isn't there?
I believe so, yeah. And one of the other complaints was that in order to get on with a pharmacy benefit manager, you had to agree to sell drugs for basically at a loss for small pharmacies. They would have to sell them for less than they paid for them. And so, yeah, there are going to be probably a lot of regulations about how they set prices and how transparent the process is going to be.
Okay. One other issue that Governor Pritzker has shown his, what some would say progressive side or whatever, is early on in his administration, he signed a bill to have the state do some regulation of gun shops, and now there's a Illinois State Rifle Association has gone to court to challenge that. And Peter, you read about that one too,
did,
right?
Yeah. This came about, one of the interesting parts of this bill is that It was passed during the 2018 General Assembly.
When
but
Bruce Rauner was
they
there.
used a procedural move because they knew Rauner was going to veto it, and they held the bill and didn't send it to the governor's office until after J.B. Pritzker was sworn in, and he immediately signed it. It was one of the first things he did after being sworn in. And it basically says that if you hold a federal firearms license, a federal license to sell and transfer firearms, you also have to have a state license. And the state licenses are very expensive. You're now going to have to comply with a lot more record-keeping requirements about who you sell guns to so that they can be traced. You have to have security cameras on all entrances,
so it's a lot of expenses.
in and out of the door.
Yeah, and I know gun advocates said, well, they're already licensed federally, that's fine, but then the state advocates were saying, well, the federal people don't have enough people to adequately review what's going on in all of these shops, and that's why the state should step in and do more.
Yeah.
And of course, you have the Second Amendment. It's certainly more popular in the Chicago area than it is in areas where hunting is
A way of life.
Yes,
Yeah.
in certain counties downstate, and even around Sangamon County, it's very popular, and the Second Amendment gets a lot more positive views. I mean, everybody thinks it's positive, but they look at it in a very different way.
In central and southern Illinois, you have a lot of mom and pop gun shops that sell to hunters and gun enthusiasts. They're not huge corporations, they're not chains, they're just little mom and pop shops. And they're talking about, the cost of the license, the cost of the security cameras, the cost of, the electronic record keeping, everything they have to do. They're afraid it's going to drive a lot of them out of business.
Interesting. Certainly things are different, different perspectives, and the whole
Well,
gun issue has taken.
All the gun control stuff is probably, in all the years I've watched, the most significant issue that is divided based on regional lines, not at all partisan lines. For example, it was a downstate Democrat from Southern Illinois who passed the legislation, or sponsored the legislation to allow concealed carry.
Right.
And it's because in the Chicago area, you see these headlines, gang shootings, little girl sitting in her bedroom and gets a bullet through her, that kind of stuff. Outside of that area, in this area, you think of firearms out in the rural areas. Well, yeah, we're going out and get a deer, or we're going out pheasant hunting. As a matter of fact, I had a nephew who worked at a school district in Macoupin County, and he's from Naperville area. And the first day of hunting season, the principal said, well, we're going to cancel class because it's hunting season. And so Brian says, oh, the students aren't going to show up? Principal says, no, the teachers aren't going to show up.
It is a different culture.
Yes, it is.
Yeah. We've got a few minutes left, but Charlie, I just wanted to congratulate you on your career, because I know that Susan Cook, the chancellor at UIS, there was an event to mark your retirement, but a person like you never really retires. But after 26 years of running the Public Affairs Reporting Program, which is a one-year graduate program which teaches journalists to cover the State House and state government, and they intern for 6 months with Capitol bureaus. I've had interns of my own in the past through the program, and you worked for the Sun-Times, of course, for 24 years before that. But you now are going to get emeritus professor status, so you're going to stay active, you're going to be on shows like this, you're going to still have an office at University of Illinois Springfield. Tell us a little about where you're going, what you're doing.
No, I've thoroughly enjoyed this. I've told people I enjoyed being with the Sun-Times in the State House. I was there 24 years, and the only job that would have lured me away was when this position opened up, because I enjoyed working with the interns at the Sun-Times. We had one from day one in the program, so I've known everybody who's ever been through the program since the early 70s. And when Bill Miller, my predecessor, retired, I was very eager to be able to succeed him and work with the students. My friends in the press room said to me, how does it feel to be going somewhere where all you can do is screw it up? Because Bill had done such a wonderful job developing what began as an idea with Paul Simon, who was the first director for the first couple of years. But yeah, it's really been wonderful, and it's the kind of thing that it would not have succeeded without people like Peter, and without you guys in the SJR, now I guess it's Gatehouse Bureau, providing our students, as they earn their master's degree, providing them the opportunity to do real journalistic work and get academic credit for it. And on any given day, I can pick up a copy of SJR, and there'll be a PAR grad in there. Same thing with the Chicago Tribune. Any given day, I pick it up, and there'll be a couple bylines in there for people who've gone through our program.
And I will say that the new director who's been named and who's starting is Jason Pisha, who worked for, I think, 21 years for the State Journal-Register. He was one of the top editors there when he left to chosen to take over. He is very good on computers, social media. He was a wonderful person to work with and for. And he's a PAR grad, Public Affairs Reporting grad himself, who has, got himself into a very good career at the State Journal-Register, and now back with the program to lead students in the future. So
yeah, and he'll add a whole dimension that's beyond my capabilities with all of his experience in the digital media, social media, and all that. I'm somebody who still goes back to the days when you actually used a typewriter where you pounded on the keys.
I did that in college myself. And Peter, you're probably too young for that.
No, but I know how to change a typewriter, really.
Well, the only other, congratulations, Charlie.
Well, thank you very much.
And to Jason, and it's been great, and it will be great to continue to work with you as many of us have. I will mention that Governor Pritzker also set into motion by putting out a request for proposal for a project management team or something to sell the James R. Thompson Center in Chicago. So that's something that's been talked about for years that may actually happen. We'll see how that goes. With that, we're going to leave it for this week. Charlie Wheeler and Peter Hancock, thanks for your help. I'm Bernie Schoenburg. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you next time on Capitol View.